So this conference is a little bit about what we can do now, and so we'll try to sort of close off this last day with a little bit of what's sort of latest and hot, just arriving, and current state, and maybe a little bit of looking forward to the very near future. So I invest in aging startups, and I run agingbiotech.info, which is a great resource for a sort of snapshot of everything that's important in the field. You can find me on LinkedIn and on X down here, and you can find these talk slides where these are live links you can click on using tinyurl.com, UL25Karl, UL for Unlimited Health, or this QR code. So we'll try to do this kind of fast. So if you are new to the field and you only remember one thing from this weekend, it should be that aging, the geroscience paradigm, aging is the primary cause of all age-related diseases, and thus the majority of suffering and death in the world. And treating those core aging pathologies will then help with multiple age-related diseases. It's therefore the most efficient way. So capsule history of, historically in humanities history, we treated diseases, and then for the past 50 years, we've learned about aging, and then if you look at the commercialization, in order for the scientific breakthroughs to get to millions of people, you have to go through companies to scale them up. And if we look at the capsule history of the field in terms of commercial translation, is that this is a graph of the number of companies that are in the aging space looking at core aging things that might impact multiple age-related diseases that are founded each 5 years over the past several decades. And it's really only in the later half of the 2010s that we really started to really grow this industry. So this is a version of a slide that many people show, but sort of to transpose the obvious problem with the world right now is that society and humanity doesn't currently resource fighting against aging appropriately. It's the primary cause, the primary risk factor for most of the worst diseases, but it only gets 0.5% to 5% of the funding, government funding, and for-profit venture funding, and similarly, it gets much less, 10x less than cancer in the philanthropic area as well. We'll go back to this slide at the end if we have time. There's lots of interesting ways that we might convince the majority of the people on the planet and the politicians to reverse that problem, that misallocation. But what I want to first go to is, this has only just sort of happened in the last 10 years, and this is small, but it is up and to the right. So looking at, the agingbiotech.info website has been around for 5 years. I can look at the growth of the field, and all of the things are up and to the right. They're not like, they haven't jumped exponentially to really fix that misallocation, but the total number of employees working at the companies, the total number of companies in the field, the total amount raised by those companies is all going up, and it's just because there's really good stuff to do in the field, and the inevitable logic of attacking these targets is very clear. In addition, the clinical trials associated with the companies are also going up, and that's just the number of clinical trials total across all the companies in the sector, but we can also see that on the whole, clinical trials are hard, and some companies are failing, or their trials are failing, but on the whole, there's mostly getting progress, succeeding, going to the next stage. So what's the current status? Well, okay, so this is the number slide. If you're only going to look at one slide in the talk to summarize the main message quantitatively, this is the slide. So some of the companies have been around for long enough that they've made it to phase 3 clinical trials, the last phase. So in fact, there have actually been a couple approvals of drugs or therapeutic interventions targeting core aging aspects that will underlie multiple age-related diseases that are now FDA approved, and we'll double-click on those in a few slides. But there are at least, even within the companies, just the companies that are on the list of all aging companies, because the company itself is focused on aging, there are 3 companies and 4 FDA approvals. And there's another 3. When you finish phase 3 clinical trials, you go into a regulatory review period where you're 90% likely to get your drug approved. and that takes still some number of months to a year because there's a time where the FDA has to look at it. There's 3 companies that have 3 different things in regulatory review, which means we very much expect those to become approvals. So you multiply the 100% to the ones that are already approved, and then the 3 that have like a 90% chance, so you expect another 3. But then the pipeline, gets wider, but of course with less chance of success as you go back in time. And of course there's increasing uncertainty here too. But what's very exciting and what is surprisingly not discussed in the field at the top scientific conferences and even at conferences like this is that there are over a dozen companies with 14 different phase 3 ongoing clinical trials that have a chance of succeeding, and the chance of succeeding is greater than a coin flip. It's 55 or 60% to get to approval from phase 3, which means that we expect another 7 or 8 approvals sometime in the next few years. And then, there's an even bigger pipeline of phase 2 trials. And so when you plug all that in, so you can go to agingbiotech.info /trials, and there's it's a meta list of lists of clinical trials. And the top one now is my hand-created list of the phase 3 clinical trials and approvals of real aging companies for things that target aging. So here are the approvals, here are the ones in regulatory review, and here are the rest. And the key thing here is, are these interventions that are in phase 3 or later things that really conform to the philosophy of the geroscience paradigm, in the sense that if they get on the market, will they really be not disease specific, but rather things that can help against multiple diverse, very different sort of sub areas of aging, age-related diseases. And so I by hand went through every one of those trials, looked at their targets and mechanism of action to see, is that the case? And there's one company where that wasn't the case, but it's legitimately an aging company. That company looked at genes that are involved in aging, and rare genetic variants that some very small fraction of people have that cause them to sort of age faster. And they looked at gene therapy approaches to fix those things. So each one of those gene therapy approaches isn't going to generalize to help you with multiple diverse age-related diseases. So that was the only counterexample. All the rest of the companies that are in phase 3 that are legit aging companies, if you look at their targets and their MOAs, they're all things in orange here that will actually help with multiple disparate age-related diseases. So examples like FGF21, which is sort of a metabolic CR mimetic. We have the MAS receptor, which affects both mTOR and AMPK. We have mitochondrial stuff that affects lots of different age-related conditions. We have some stem cell things. So every one of these things, we expect that they will be able to label expand and therefore embody the geroscience paradigm and actually all be pipeline in a pill, which of course will be lucrative as well as wonderful for humanity in reducing suffering. I'll go back to this comment. So anyway, the summary of this is basically, a couple different approvals every few years for the next several years. So the next 5 years are going to be super exciting. Okay, so let's double click on a couple of the ones that have recently been approved, and for some reason, the field these are not commonly discussed in the field. We get a lot of discussion about Brian Johnson, and we get a lot of discussion about GLP-1 drugs. Within the last 5 years, we've had 5 approvals for treating transthyretin amyloidosis, or ATTR. TTR is an important protein, and it does misfold and agglomerate the same way as amyloid beta and tau and alpha-synuclein. Most of the other big misfolding agglomerating proteins are the cause of neurodegenerative diseases, but actually ATTR causes heart failure. And interestingly, it seems to be the cause of death of the majority of people who make it to age 110 plus. So it's the thing that kills the oldest of the old. Now in preclinical, in rodent studies, mice, when they do lifespan extension studies, it's very common that you'll get an extension of medium lifespan. So you'll get like the average or the median will be improved, but it's much harder to find drugs that actually extend what's called maximal lifespan, the lifespan of the sort of the decile, the top 10% longest lived of the trial cohort. And in humans, that's probably the case too. Here's a drug which actually it fixes the thing that kills the most old humans. But quite possibly this category of therapeutic is the thing that's going to extend maximal human lifespan. You know, we got one person to 122-ish, and you know, maybe if we start treating the super old, the centenarians, we might actually get a large number of people past 120. But it's really a generalizing drug. There's several different body parts and age-related diseases and pathologies that have ATTR implicated. And so it's actually going to probably help with several different diseases. The other main thing that's happened in the very recently is in the late end of 2024, Mesoblast got the first FDA approval for an off-the-shelf allogeneic stem cell therapy for a mesenchymal stem cell therapy. And then a year before that was the first approval for a hematopoietic stem cell therapy. Hematopoietic stem cells plus mesenchymal stem cells are the underlying stem cell types that embody quite a large fraction of human cells. This is a big deal. It's been a long time coming where we've got stem cell offshore clinics and other things, as Christine talked about, but these are FDA approvals. So this is legit data, and we can fully expect that these stem cells are going to help with a lot of different conditions, and several of them have actually already started trials for other conditions besides the very narrow ones that they've been approved for. Now, both these ATTR drugs and the stem cell drugs are at the moment for narrow indications, and they're all also kind of expensive. When we start getting approvals for things that many more millions of people have, then hopefully the prices will come down. And there's 3 in regulatory review. They're all also very generalizable things: mitochondria stuff, anti-myostatin, a monoclonal antibody, and the MAS receptor that I mentioned. So overall, the summary, the sort of non-quantitative take-home message of the talk, main point is that, you know, we've got a couple approvals, and we expect 10 more in the next few years. And that's going to keep going because we have a large trickle of, you know, farther away from approval is a larger number of companies who are still a, you know, smaller chance of success away, but that larger number times that smaller percentage chance is going to keep the trickle going. So there's a lot of uncertainty, you know, going out past 5 years. Predicting the future is tough. In particular, there's a couple reasons for a large downside risk and a large upside potential. You know, it's possible once this pipeline and the pill stuff becomes clear, because some of the early approved things start actually label expanding, that could really trigger an influx of investment. And of course, there's big regulatory risks, especially right now during this really big transition time. The new people coming into FDA and NIH might seem likely to be a little bit more friendly toward the field and toward FDA reform. On the other hand, you know, there's a big risk that the FDA could just kind of come to a grinding halt for a while. So, you know, we hope for the best, but I think in general, the fact that this pipeline is here and that the approvals are started is a really good sign for the field. So that's it. Question. Oh, so let me one real quick. Let me just say, you know, this big misallocation of funding in the world, you know, there are a lot of different narratives that people are using to try to fix that. And, you know, maybe it's going to be the X Prize. Maybe it's going to be robust mouse rejuvenation that Aubrey's pursuing with the LEV Foundation. Maybe it's going to be people like Brian Johnson bringing more notoriety to the field. Maybe it's going to be pet longevity, et cetera, et cetera. I think this narrative about approved drugs is sort of one of the ones that might really help. All right, that's it. Questions?
Well, you're right to ask why people aren't talking more about this. Even I didn't know about this, and it's amazing that we're not talking more. So here's my question. So these have been approved and for certain indications, and doctors are allowed to prescribe off-label. So does that mean that I can go to a doctor now and get these approved right now if I pay cash for them?
So there's a couple reasons why these first couple approvals are going to be tough. The ATTR drugs are mostly approved for, so the ATTR misfolds, and that causes heart failure and a bunch of other problems, and that happens to everybody. There's a rare genetic form where it causes the misfolding to happen much more frequently that causes the TTR molecule to be a little bit more unstable. And so it's easiest to go to market for that. So those are where most of the approvals are. And because like the standard operating procedure in pharma right now, when you go for a rare disease, you have a very small paying patient population, so you have to price the drug very highly. So these are like $200,000+ a year drugs. So most people aren't going to want them prescribed off-label. Also, it's not clear at what age you should start taking them. They seem very likely to help the very old. There is a lot of data suggesting that a large fraction of people, even in their 80s and above, or maybe their 70s, have this ATTR. 25% was found in 85+-year-olds, and 15% of people who went for valve replacement had some. So I think we need more data, and then we need a sort of either the price controls to be imposed after 9 or 13 years when that triggers, or we need the expansion to cause a price reduction, because then the pharmaceutical companies can recoup their investment money. And then the stem cells, I think this is going to happen faster, but at the moment these are approved for very narrow indications like graft versus host disease, when you have when you do a bone marrow transplant, you ablate the whole immune system, and so it's a little bit more of a risky off-label prescription, but I don't know. Maybe there are doctors who would do it. I have no idea. But the ones that are coming next, some of these are a little bit more reasonable. I mean, there's a bunch of cardiolipin mitochondria therapy work, and I think that's a little easier to imagine an off-label prescription. So, and that's in regulatory review. It was really expected approval in Q1. So I don't know what the status is. There's no new news on it in the last couple months. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you so much, Karl.